Hi, and welcome to the Haynes Mechanical webinar on Colorado Buildings Energy Initiatives. We're going to be talking today about some of the updates that have been put out there, trying to clear up some of the information for that a lot of people are getting out in the marketplace. My name is Andy Marshall. I'm the Client Services Customer Success Manager here at Haynes Mechanical, and I'm joined by Grace Butler.
Hi, I'm Grace. I'm the energy engineer here at Haynes.
So we'll go over a little bit about what we're talking about today. I want to start out with an overview of the various programs that are out there, the two main ones, Energize Denver and Building Performance Colorado. Give a basic understanding, kind of help clear a couple confusing things up about those. Talk about, are these programs actually going to happen? I think there's a lot of questions regarding lawsuits, things of that nature. As well as what the new deadlines and fees are for both programs, both Building Performance Colorado and Energize Denver. Talk about data verification, something new that's come out, what that is, what the deadline is, and who can do the data verification for these programs. The adjustments and compliance as well, target and timeline adjustments, what those look like now with some of the updates. Any future changes we might be seeing, as well as some incentives and rebates. After that, we will allow some time for questions if we get a few through the chat, as well as some common questions we hear out in the marketplace. So with that, Grace, we'll start with an overview of the programs. A lot of customers have seen just a ton of emails around Building Performance Colorado, Energize Denver, Regulation 28, data verification. I think there's a lot of noise out there. So I'm hoping you can kind of help cut through that and just explain high level what the programs are, what people need to know.
For sure. And we'll start with basics. So there's two major programs we're talking about today. There's Building Performance Colorado, which is through the State Energy Office. And then there's Energize Denver, which applies to only buildings within Denver. So Building Performance Colorado, or BPC, applies to all commercial buildings that are 50,000 square feet and above. And they are required to do annual benchmarking, and they're also required to hit certain energy or greenhouse gas emissions targets. This one is often referred to as Regulation 28, but they're the same program. Energize Denver, very similar, but it applies to all buildings that are 5,000 square feet and above within Denver. Buildings that are 25,000 square feet and above are also subject to benchmarking annually, and also some different but similar energy targets on a timeline. So those are the two we're talking about today.
One of the questions I get asked a lot about, Grace, is how did they determine the targets? Who sets the targets? Not so much how to meet them right now, but just where did the information come from to establish these benchmarks that they need to hit?
So both the city and the state have set goals for themselves to be net zero carbon emissions. And in order to do that, they have set back these emissions or energy targets on commercial buildings, identifying commercial buildings as a big source of energy and emissions. Both of those emissions reductions goals, or net zero emissions goals, are codified into law through either the state or the city. So that part is not going away. The targets were then set in order to meet those overall goals. So that's where the commercial building targets come in, and that's why they have established them in the first place.
So being that it's based on property type, obviously, hospital's not going to have the same target as an office building, et cetera. It's always good for people to know. I believe there's a lot of different ways that these targets have been communicated to people, whether through websites or letters that have gone out. So people should know where they have to be for these programs.
Yeah, all building owners who are subject to these programs should have received a letter. If you don't know where that letter is, or you lost it, or whoever was in charge was left, you can use these links on our slide at the bottom there. One for Energize Denver, one for Building Performance Colorado, and that'll allow you to look up your building by address or by ID number, and it'll show you what your targets are and what your benchmarking status is and all that information.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of resources out there for people. As you mentioned, Grace, the websites are out there. Each department, both Energize Denver and Building Performance Colorado, have their own help desks. You can always reach out to a Haynes representative. If you have additional questions on this as well, we're happy to help anyone walk through the process and get a better understanding of where their buildings are at. One of the other things that comes up is these programs seem to have come really kind of out of nowhere. Not so much Energize Denver, but definitely Building Performance Colorado. Energize Denver's been around for probably about 8 years now in some form or fashion. But want to pull up a map here to show that a lot of these programs have been around for a significant amount of time, correct?
Yeah, the first program that I know about started back in 2005 in the Washington state. And as you can see on the map, it's pretty widespread, both coasts, bunch in the middle. Some of them are just benchmarking. Some of them are energy goals. Some of them are energy and emissions goals. I know that Maryland is trying to go greenhouse gas neutral on a certain timeline. So energy and emission reductions is pretty widespread, and these types of programs aren't going anywhere.
And both Energize Denver and Building Performance Colorado, from what I've heard, have been reaching out to a lot of these different municipalities, these states, to really help set up their own programs and base it off of the learning curves these other ones that have gone through and have been around for quite a while to really establish where they're at currently. I think there's roughly 35 plus now at this point, and I know there's a few other ones that are out there that are being worked on, potentially passed through. So it is something that is here to stay, it seems. It's spreading. A lot of places are taking a look at this. With that and with the changes we're seeing in both Energize Denver and Building Performance Colorado, there's been a lot of updates, deadline shifts. I think the biggest thing that people are asking about, and it's really kind of the elephant in the room, is the lawsuits against them. Do we see these lawsuits potentially changing anything for Energize Denver, Building Performance Colorado, and maybe talk about it, the main one that is out there?
So my brother's the lawyer. I'm not the lawyer, I'm the engineer. But as I understand it, there was a lawsuit that was brought forth by a couple HOA and condo boards against Energize Denver earlier in the spring. And that was dismissed this summer due to lack of evidence. And that has been refiled since then, this fall timeframe. And as I understand, again, not a lawyer, but they are arguing that some of the efficiency requirements that Energize Denver has put on equipment are in contrast to those at the federal level through the Department of Energy. And so they're saying that Denver is trying to usurp those federal mandates. And again, as I've heard from Energize Denver, they're pretty clear that these are not requirements above and beyond what the federal requirements are. They're just easing the permit process for things like electrification of equipment. So they're pretty convinced that this lawsuit will not make any changes to the program. That is yet to be seen, but that's my prediction as well.
And I think we can take a look. We've seen lawsuits like this occur in some of the other areas that these programs have been established. So kind of taking a look at history and making some assumptions off of that. Again, these are assumptions, but we can definitely take a look and say that it really hasn't impacted any of the other programs in the past. So that it's a bit of an uphill battle for them to get this through and, like you said, make any significant changes to it.
Right.
So do want to take a look here next at a lot of the timelines that are out there. We'll start with Building Performance Colorado. But what we're seeing is that some different deadlines that are put out. I get a lot of questions on, well, when do I need to benchmark? When do I need to meet my targets? Things like that. So really would like to clear that up, especially with some of the changes that we've seen.
Yeah, so you're right. It's confusing, and a couple changes just apply to this year and a couple changes apply moving forward. So Building Performance Colorado, they have their 2 energy or emissions reductions years. The first one is 2026. The next one is 2030. Those have remained the same. But what has changed is that the 2026 target is now actually a goal, which means if you don't hit it, there will be no fees or penalties assessed. So it's not necessarily going away, but it's just a little less stringent.
The main question I get asked by everyone is now that there are no penalties for 2026, and it is not a goal, it is a recommendation, so to speak, can anyone just ignore it now? That is what I always get asked. So love to hear your take on that, Grace.
It's tempting, and since there are no fees and penalties, there's no real downside to ignoring it, except that it provides a nice little benchmark and a nice little progress report for how you're doing towards your 2030 target. Because those aren't going away, and there will be real fines and penalties assessed if you cannot hit your 2030 target. So yeah, you can ignore it if you want, but it's going to make hitting 2030 a lot harder.
So for Building Performance Colorado, just to kind of put a bow on the deadline shifts and time changes, the main thing people need to know that did change is the reporting season for benchmarking. Used to be June 1st. Obviously, we're waiting now kind of final approval, but we're fully expecting it to go from the reporting season, July 1st to November 1st, with November 1st being the drop dead date that you have to have your information submitted.
That's right. Like you said, there's still pending final approval on this, but we expect that to come by the end of the month. So the reporting season from now going forward will be from July 1st to November 1st for the state program. There's a couple other deadlines on there. I won't read them, but those apply to adjustments, which we'll talk about later.
So the one program we have seen quite a few shifts in overall on timeline adjustments, target adjustments, and also just the final deadlines has been Energize Denver. Could you talk a little bit about what the target dates were and what they're at now?
Yeah, so there used to be 3 target dates, and they have switched to this 2 target date program for all buildings. So it's first 2028 and 2032. And the reason that they shifted these deadlines is they did a lot of market research and solicited feedback from building owners, other commercial real estate people in the market, and how they were doing reaching their targets. And a lot of the feedback was that it was tough to get it done on the initial timeline. So they've moved the timeline. So everyone has their first target in 2028 and their next target in 2032. Both of these are targets. So if you don't hit them, fees and penalties will be assessed for not hitting those targets.
The benchmarking deadline did not change for Energize Denver, correct? That is still June 1st that everyone needs to submit their energy usage now through the new Energize Denver portal that they have, which does work very well to have a more immediate feedback response on your benchmarking if there is an issue, things of that nature.
Yeah, so their benchmarking still ends June 1st. So you have to get all of your reporting done by then. It's a little complicated this year. They extended it for everyone to September 1st, just as the changes came out and people started getting comfortable using the portal. But that is going back to a June 1st deadline for all years moving forward.
So one thing I do want to bring up that is out there is deemed compliance. And for those that don't know, it is if you meet Energize Denver's goal, you're good with the state. That has not been formally approved yet. That is kind of what we're waiting on potentially being released, correct?
Right. So as I understand it, they are reviewing, well, the Colorado Energy Office is reviewing the Energize Denver program to make sure that hitting the Energize Denver goals will allow the state to hit their overall emissions goals, like we discussed in the beginning. So they're currently reviewing that. They were hoping to have an answer by the end of the month, but ideally, the result of that would be if you are subject to both programs, that if you are able to hit your Energize Denver goals, that will be deemed compliant with the Building Performance Colorado goals. So you'd only have to do one set of paperwork. You'd still have to do benchmarking for both programs, but target adjustments, timeline adjustments, all of that would be done a lot simpler.
Yeah, so obviously it's still a little confusing out there as far as which deadlines you have to hit, especially if you're in both Denver and Colorado. You do still currently have to kind of work both programs. However, we are fully expecting that deemed compliance will be approved and make things and life a little bit easier for building owners that have a building in Denver and obviously Colorado at that point. So trying to get some stuff cleared up there, obviously with legislation and government, things can take a little bit of time, but they are kind of moving towards that is our understanding.
And end of the month is what I heard most recently, so we'll see how that goes.
The one thing I think that most interests people with all the updates and changes out there are the fees and penalties. Have we seen a lot of fees and penalties change for both programs, well, Building Performance and Energize Denver? Probably start with Building Performance again, and just, are there any changes to the fees? What does that fee structure look like?
So there have been some changes to the fees for Building Performance Colorado starting this year. There already was existing that $100 benchmarking fee for all building owners when they submit their benchmarking. There's now a new $400 fee that feeds an enterprise fund. So this makes your total every year $500 for all buildings that are covered by the program. Now, just to get back to the enterprise fund, it is a fund of money designed to help building owners hit these goals and hit their energy efficiency or greenhouse gas emissions goals. So there haven't been a ton of details released yet since it's brand new, but ideally all the building owners who pay into this program can get some benefit out of it.
And I think that's a good point you bring up, Grace, is it is relatively new. I believe the state just sent out the email a couple weeks ago, maybe at that point. So there are a lot of questions around what this is, what it goes to, that I think there's a lot of vague details on it right now, and they're trying to get a lot of that cleared up as the questions come in, what they need to respond to in regards to that. But it is something that is new starting for this next reporting year, that yeah, you will have the $500, both the benchmarking fee and the enterprise fee as well. Now, compliance penalties have stayed the same for Building Performance Colorado. Could you talk a little bit about what that structure looks like if a building is not hitting its target?
Yeah, so as a reminder, these compliance penalties are only applicable to your 2030 goal, your final goal. But if you are unable to be in compliance with that goal, you will be charged a monthly penalty. The first month is $2,000, and after that, it's $5,000 for every month that you're not in compliance.
A lot of building owners have talked about, well, those aren't as stringent as some of the fines for Energize Denver that we'll hear about. I might as well just pay the fines. It's not that simple, correct? They will have additional work they have to do on top of the fines if they're not meeting their EY targets.
Right, so if you're out of compliance, not only do you have to pay $5,000 every month, but you have to provide information to the energy office about your the steps you're taking in order to get in compliance. You have to have a monthly meeting, you have to update documentation, you have to show them some progress is being made every month. So it's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of documentation, it's some extra meetings. It's just a little bit more complicated than only paying $5,000.
I also believe if they're not doing all that work, meeting monthly with the Colorado Energy Office, providing all this documentation, it does leave them open to potential liens and lawsuits, correct, from the Energy Office.
Correct. If you're still not in compliance and unwilling to work with them towards reaching a goal, then they can place a lien on your property.
Yeah, and Energize Denver can do the same thing, but they also took some feedback and changed their fee structure based on what they received from building owners out there. Can you talk a little bit about the changes that were made there?
Yeah, so they have changed their fee structure. It is assessed based on how many KBTUs of energy you are from your goal. So how much energy you are using on top of what your goal is, your EY goal. And it was 30 cents per KBTU, and now it is dropped to 23 cents per KBTU. So it can still add up, but it has definitely dropped quite significantly. That other one shown on the table is for timeline adjustments. If you have submitted and been approved for a timeline adjustment and then still can't meet your goal, you get an extra penalty on top of that of 10 extra cents per KBTU. So just kind of important to keep in mind as you're working towards those targets. This also is for both targets, the 2028 and the 2032, that these can be assessed.
So just to really kind of clarify and keep it simple, say, for example, a building, and I'm going to use very basic numbers to try and make it easy, but say a building was using 3,000 KBTU for energy, their target was to get down to 1,000, they would be assessed the penalty on just that difference between the 3,000 and the 1,000.
Correct, yeah.
And that is for both targets, so it can add up, like you said, especially if you're not taking it seriously and trying to drive towards those targets. One big change that we saw building owners receive notification on that a lot of questions came up in regards to this was data verification. And this is just for Energize Denver only. So Building Performance Colorado does not have or require data verification at the moment. We could see that potentially change, but the information we have right now is only Energize Denver has that. Could you talk a little bit about what data verification is and who can do it?
Yeah, so we'll start with when it's required. It's required twice for all buildings subject to Energize Denver. The first one is required by June 1st of 2026, and it has to verify the reporting years of 2024 or 2025. Either one can be submitted by this June 1st, 2026 deadline. The next time you'll need to do data verification is for your final target in 2032. Now, the data verification is just to confirm that people are hitting the targets that they're saying they're hitting. It's done by a third party. It cannot be done by the building owner or an employee of the building owner. Again, just to confirm that the building is reporting the energy that they're actually using. If you have been Energy Star certified in the past year or two, for the 2024 or 2025 performance years, or if you've applied for one of their target or timeline adjustments, then you've already done a verification form and you are exempt until that final target year.
So you brought up Energy Star certification. I think that's a good point to bring up. There is a difference. While it uses the same checklist, correct, there is a difference between being Energy Star certified and having that information and what is actually required for data verification.
Yeah, so if you are familiar with Energy Star certification process, you've already done the data verification form. But there's a couple differences. Energize Denver does not require a site visit. So it does not require that the indoor environmental quality section be filled out. They may still request a site visit if they want to confirm some things and in order to confirm your data, but it's not required. And also a PE stamp is not required for Energize Denver data verification. They have a list of licenses or certifications that your third-party verifier must have. PE is one of them, but it doesn't have to be a PE. It could be a CEN, it could be a BEAP. That's all listed on their website.
And they also have a list of approved vendors that can do this process for building owners on their website. Again, they're trying to centralize everything. So you would submit this information through the portal. I believe you can access the list of people through their portal as well. So you definitely want to find someone that is able to go through this process on there that is an approved vendor by Energize Denver.
Correct.
So the big thing I think people ask about and have a lot of questions on are target adjustments and timeline adjustments. Not so much timeline adjustments per se, but definitely target adjustments and how it can help a building owner out. So I'm hoping you can talk about the updates to that and how it can really make a big difference for building owners.
So before we get into the specific programs, we'll just back up and define or show you what the target adjustment versus the timeline adjustment is. You probably already understand it, but just as a reminder, the target adjustment changes the final target that you're trying to reach, whether that's energy or greenhouse gas. It's available through both programs, and it moves the needle on which target you're trying to hit. Now, the timeline adjustment doesn't change your final target. You still have to hit the same metric, but it allows you to have a little bit more time to do that. Again, a timeline adjustment is also available in both programs.
And we'll talk about the differences between both Building Performance Colorado and Energize Denver, but at a high level, just on the target adjustment, can obviously have a pretty big impact, but it's all driven, I shouldn't say it's all driven, primarily driven off of property use, making sure that they're capturing all of that. I believe in the past, they just kind of said, hey, you're an office building where some of the office buildings downtown have retail, restaurants. So they're really trying to capture all that to make sure they're providing appropriate targets. Anecdotally, we've seen target adjustments that we've done for certain customers have a pretty significant impact where their final target basically jumped up by about 40 points on EUI, and they're already hitting some of those 2030 targets. So do want to talk a little bit about what the differences are between a target adjustment for Building Performance Colorado and for Energize Denver. But again, at a high level, it can have a pretty big impact. Now, the timeline adjustments are more just to help them hit their goal,
Right.
provide some additional time, and we'll talk about some of the use cases for those as we go along here. So starting out, let's talk a little bit about Building Performance Colorado target adjustments and what that looks like for building owners and how they can utilize that to help drive them towards their goal.
So there's a lot of different options for target adjustments. Starting with the simplest and most common, which is what Andy was talking about, the standard target adjustment. This is for benchmarking use types and for other things such as swimming pools, parking garages, EV chargers, things like that. Things that can be adjusted within your benchmarking that better represent your building. So you can get a target that better represents the energy use and the energy requirements of your building. Again, this is the pretty common one. It could be done right through Energy Star Portfolio Manager and then a couple other pieces of paperwork for both programs. And then you're done and you've got a new target. Other ones that are applied to just Building Performance Colorado are the benchmarking year adjustment. This one's new for this year. All benchmarking years, baseline years for buildings are 2021 in the state program. But for some buildings, that's not a very good litmus test for where they were. Some of them were still in COVID lockdown procedures. Some of them hadn't bounced back quite yet. So if you have a different baseline year in mind, 2019 is one that you can use, and that would make it the same as Energize Denver. So that's a new adjustment. Others include timeline adjustment, the pathway selection, which pathway you're trying to follow in order to meet those targets. That'll change your final target. And then there are individualized target adjustments for buildings that are just specialized. They, don't fit into one property use or a couple property use types, and they're just a little bit more individual. So they can go through the process to get an individualized energy or GHG target through the state.
So the pathway selection is definitely a big one, I think, for people. They already had to choose their pathway. That deadline passed. Building Performance Colorado did want to make it available to say, hey, you're making changes to your building. It might not make sense, the default pathway, if they didn't select one. So now they can take a look and say, hey, if I don't want to do the standard target, I can do a % reduction, greenhouse gas reduction if they're maybe moving equipment towards all electric. What does that process look like if they want to change their pathway selection?
Like you said, there was a deadline, an earlier deadline for choosing your pathway, and that was a very simple click and report. Now they're requiring a little bit more documentation, just similar to the other timeline and target adjustment processes. I don't remember exactly, they haven't released the final requirements for the pathway selection, and I don't remember if they're the exact same as the timeline and target, if that's what they're aiming for. But probably what you'll have to do is a level 2 audit, and then you'll have to report what kind of steps you're making towards these new pathway targets.
So that covers Building Performance Colorado. I want to talk a little bit about the Energize Denver target adjustments. Some of the documentation for the adjustments through Energize Denver is not as strict or doesn't require as much. Could you talk a little bit about the adjustments that are available for Energize Denver and what the requirements are for those?
So Energize Denver has added a few different types of target adjustments. They still have the standard one, which we talked about, the benchmarking one. They also have this % reduction target, which is on there twice, luckily for you guys to read. It says that no building needs to reduce their target by more than 42%. So if you are looking at your EUI target and it's more than 42% below your baseline year, then you can apply for a target adjustment to raise that up. Another one is your adaptive reuse target adjustment. If you are changing the whole use type of the building, then this can help modify the target to better suit the needs of the new construction.
Now, the % reduction target is a big deal for a lot of people. I've seen a lot of buildings where when this program initially came out and had the target requirements, a lot of people took a look and said, I am way over my goal. I have no shot of ever hitting it based on what they put out there. So this is a again, a very good example, in my opinion, of Energize Denver taking the feedback and saying, hey, we want to make this work for everyone. We want to drive towards this goal together. Here's how we can do that. So I think that's going to do a lot for older buildings out there that, have that aging infrastructure, that it's going to be tough to hit those targets. Want to wrap up kind of some of the adjustments with some of the timeline adjustments for Energize Denver as well. One of the big things out there, and I want you to touch on this, is the interim compliance hold. That's the new thing. I have had some people ask me, well, does that make sense for my building? Who should be using this? Who should take advantage of this as well? So could you clear up what the interim compliance hold is, as well as touch on some of the other timeline adjustments, please?
Yeah, so this is a new thing, again, with all the changes this year to the Energize Denver program. So on the screen, you can see there's an interim compliance hold versus timeline adjustment, and kind of the reasons you would choose one versus the other. But the interim compliance hold is meant to be a 2-year hold in your compliance that kind of allows you a little bit of extra time based on one of these reasons to hit your target. Now, the target's not changing, and the target year, the final 2032 target year, is not changing, but it allows you a little bit more time in between to make some changes to your building. Timeline adjustment would be when you won't be able to hit your target on the agreed upon timeline. Something that I've come across is there was a building that was subscribing to a PV array that wasn't going to come online until after the target year. So they applied for a timeline adjustment so they could take advantage of that new renewable energy and just move their target to when that came online. So that would be an example of a timeline adjustment versus an interim compliance hold.
And I think with all these different adjustments out there, every building is unique. So if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, Grace, or just your local Haynes representative to be able to kind of walk through this. There are going to be a lot of custom use situations for buildings. Again, whether you're a hospital, a medical office building, just a standard office building, things like that. There are different adjustments that probably can occur to help you towards that target. So definitely want to try and get as much customized help as you can through this process.
And I'll just plug the help desks for both programs as well. They've tried to make a lot of changes to their availability, especially in Energize Denver. I know that Energize Denver now allows you to have one-on-one coaching if you have any questions. So reaching out to their help desk via phone or email or through one of the portals is a really easy way to get help as well.
So a lot of people are going to ask, what are some incentives and rebates that are out there? How can I work towards this? Is there additional help? What can I rely on to really drive this? As we know, a lot of the projects probably needed to hit these targets are relatively expensive.
Both programs offer some rebates and incentives. Starting with Building Performance Colorado, they have their large building decarbonization grant that is, they're taking applications right now. So this is for buildings who are going to make big strides in reducing their overall emissions, either more reduction than their target or on a faster timeline than the timeline set by the program. So if you're a building who's really working towards electrification or decarbonization, this would be something to explore a little bit more. Energize Denver also has rebates available. In the past, they've had them for heat pumps. And I believe those are coming back online next year, although I don't have the details. But they do also offer rebates for ASHRAE Level 2 energy audits. And that can pay for most, if not all, of the study itself. So those are really interesting and good to look into if you think you need a little bit more help finding ways to reduce your energy, thinking of projects, implementing those projects, and kind of having a guide towards compliance.
And on the energy audits, that is something that I've had a conversation with Energize Denver on. What they've said is, and I don't know the exact amount, but they have a good amount of funding for those rebates on the audits. It is a first come, first served basis, is my understanding. Once the funding is gone, there is no more. They have also set up where you can retroactively apply for the audit, correct?
Yeah, so if you had an audit done anytime after November 17th of 2022, you can still get that rebate retroactively. It's just an application through the portal or through their website. So take advantage of that if you've already done a level 2 audit and would like to get that rebate.
Definitely reach out if you feel like, hey, I've done an audit, it might be applicable. please reach out. We can help you walk through that process, or if you're interested in having one done as well, we can discuss what that looks like for your specific building. One thing I think we've covered a ton of stuff so far already today, a lot of updates and changes. Skeptics out there tend to push back and say, well, they're already making all these changes. It's not going to happen. Or they're just going to change something down the road. We're not expecting future changes necessarily from either program. Denver specifically has kind of said, as you mentioned, hey, this is our final program. We're not doing anything. Building Performance Colorado is a little different, however. We're not expecting a ton of changes coming up. We're expecting a few to be announced, but they have a little bit different process to try and change their program.
So Energize Denver, like you said, is pretty set. They gathered the feedback, they made their updates to make it easier for building owners, and now this is kind of the final technical guidance from them. Building Performance Colorado, like you said, we're still waiting on a couple approvals for things, the new reporting year, some more documents for how to do timeline and pathway adjustments. But any changes made to the Building Performance Colorado process have to go through legislation. And so it's a lot harder for them to make changes, and it takes a long time. So I wouldn't expect any future changes to that program either after they finalize these current changes.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, again, going back to the map we showed, this program, these types of programs have been around for over 20 years already. They're spreading across the nation. We're fully expecting these programs to be here, to stay, to be able to help people reach these goals as well. So definitely not expecting a lot of changes other than some of the ones we've already talked about to be announced as well. So want to thank everyone. That's really kind of the bulk of our information that we wanted to provide. I believe we do have some questions that we'll touch on here, but we did put our contact information up there as well. So if you guys do have additional questions specific to your building, please reach out as well. Did we get some additional questions on there? Just the ones that you sent us already? So one of the ones that came in was in regards to the Building Enterprise Fund. As we talked about, it's still pretty vague out there, but they are wondering, is this per building that they have to pay this?
Yeah, so this is the new $400 fee per building for covered buildings under the Building Performance Colorado program. And like I said, it feeds into a big enterprise fund. Now, the board for that fund was what we all got an email about, and they convened at the end of September. And that was their first board meeting. And that board is in charge of setting the requirements for getting funding from this program, kind of who can get the funding, what the projects are for. So those details haven't been ironed out yet. But they've established their board and they had a meeting, and all those details are available through the Colorado Energy Office website if you're interested in seeing who's on the board, what they talked about, when the next board meeting is, things like that. But the end of the day, this is a new fund, and so we're still waiting on how they establish who can gain funds from it.
So another question that came in is there an easy way to identify if my building could use a target adjustment? I don't know that there's one silver bullet to say this is it, other than maybe taking a look at just the different property types and does it make sense and meet kind of the requirements both programs are looking at. Are there any other ways to easily say, I should be thinking about a target adjustment?
So definitely the first way is if you have a standard target adjustment, meaning the building use type in Energy Star Portfolio Manager doesn't necessarily match what you're doing at your building. Or if you have one of those high energy use components at your building, such as EV chargers, data center, parking garage lighting, things like that. Those kinds of things are pretty easy for building owners to identify because they're the ones in the building. So if you have one of those, go for the standard target adjustment. I would say beyond that, if you think that you're just going to have a very hard time hitting your targets, then you might be a candidate for some other type of target adjustment. So I would say reach out for help. You can reach out to your Haynes rep, you can reach out to the help desks. Again, Energize Denver is doing one-on-one coaching with building owners. So I would say that's when you ask for help and reach out to someone who has a little bit more experience in this and can take a look at your building.
One of the other questions we got was obviously Building Performance Colorado their fees are set. Pretty straightforward. You just have to do a lot more documented work on the back end if you don't hit your target. But the Energize Denver fee, obviously doing it per kBTU of your goal not achieved, and it's 23 cents. Is there an easy way to calculate your Energize Denver fee if you're not hitting your target?
Yeah, so they have a calculator through their portal and their website that you can use. And so you could plug in, say, your current energy usage, and it would calculate how much you would owe if you made no changes. You can also, anticipate some changes and things like that. So look for the fee calculator through their website, and I believe it's on the portal as well.
So I want to wrap up here, also to just say sorry for the technical issues we had on this as well. We will be emailing out and posting the recording for people to view, so that way you have a copy of where some of the links are at. A lot of this information lives. Do want to let people know as well, we are doing a happy hour and providing some really kind of one-on-one guidance in regards to your specific building on Wednesday, October 22nd. If you're interested in learning more about where your building is at, want to have a few drinks while you do it in order to process this, please reach out to your Haynes rep. They can set you up and get you an official invitation. But Grace and I will both be there to really help talk you through where your building's at, what next steps might look like, and answer any questions you have in regards to your specific building. Other than that, want to thank you for your time, Grace. Want to thank everyone that was able to join us. Again, sorry for the technical issues, but we will get this recording out so everyone has that information. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you guys later.